many minds have contributed to the evolution of psychotherapy. In the quest for the understanding and resolution of inner conflict, philosophies and approaches were born. Traditionally, clinicians have embraced one model of therapy to the exclusion of others. Today, they draw from several approaches, integrating these in a manner suitable to their own style and the needs of their clients. This is the art of integrated psychotherapy. Psychologist, educator, and author Dr. Gerald Corey has made it his life work to understand and teach integrated psychotherapy. Skillfully drawing from existential, psychodynamic, and cognitive behavioral approaches, integrated psychotherapy stems from the belief that no single model is comprehensive enough to address all facets of the human experience. Dr. Gerald Corey.
Let me stress that developing an integrated approach to therapy is a very involved and ongoing process. It grows out of one's life experiences and learning from many sources. The focus is on the client as a whole person. It involves working with one's thoughts, feelings, and behavior. My own personal orientation is strongly influenced by the existential approach, which emphasizes choice, personal responsibility, and taking action. In my view, the counseling process is an opportunity for clients to explore options and make better choices in their lives. I see the client's role in therapy as a collaborator in the process of reaching towards goals that he or she has identified. Who you are as a person and your ability to establish a therapeutic relationship are the crucial variables. Both the client and the counselor have a cultural background. It is extremely important to understand how this affects the therapeutic relationship. I try to remain open to my own development as a person. Frequently, I make use of colleagues as consultants.
In this program, Dr. Corey will be using an integrated approach with a client named Ruth over a 6-month period in an unrehearsed, simulated process of therapy.
Ruth is a 39-year-old married woman with 4 teenagers. When I first saw her, her complaints were difficulty in breathing, dizziness, and a host of other psychosomatic complaints. She also reported a general dissatisfaction with her life.
I guess I've become aware recently that I pretty much live for others so far. It's like I've been the superwoman who gives and gives until I'm empty. And then there's no more left to give. I've tried to be the good wife and the good mother that my family expects me to be. Or maybe that I expect myself to be. I don't like who I am. I don't like my looks. I don't like my body. My family nagged me as a child about all kinds of things. I was always worried about who they wanted me to be. I do look forward to becoming an elementary school teacher, but I get so overwhelmed, I don't know if I'll ever get there. I try to do the right things, and I think I'm a good person. I go to church every Sunday, but I still feel guilty for leaving my father's church. My parents haven't really disowned me, but sometimes it feels like they have. I'm pretty nervous about going to see a counselor. I don't know what to expect. I just hope the counselor will tell me what to do so I can go do it. Maybe then things will get better.
Featured in this program will be segments from 10 sessions of therapy, each with a different emphasis. Part 1 will include the beginning, the therapeutic relationship, establishing therapeutic goals, cognitive focus, and emotional focus. Part 2, behavioral focus, integrative focus, exploring the past, working toward decisions and behavior change, and evaluation and termination.
In this first session, my main attempt is to teach Ruth about the therapeutic process. I'd like to stress, however, that in real life, therapy is sometimes a very difficult, demanding, and tedious process, and will not progress as smoothly as you will see here. Maybe you can say a bit about what actually prompted you to make that call.
Oh, you mean to call you?
Yeah, at this point in your life.
Well, a couple weeks ago I went to the doctor, and I was having some trouble with my neck and my shoulders, and my heart was racing, and I went to see him, and after the exam he told me that there was nothing physically wrong, but that I needed to call a counselor.
Was that reassuring, that he told you there was nothing physically wrong?
Well, I was glad to know that there was nothing wrong with my heart, because I was really worried about that. But now I don't really know what it is.
For Dr. Corey, letting Ruth talk about what it's like to come in for therapy is his first priority.
It makes me kind of nervous because I don't know if I change a lot, like what it'll be like at home then. You know, like maybe with my husband it'd be different. Maybe with my kids it would be different. So I just wonder if I change a lot here, you know, how they'll feel about me changing. I'm not sure if they're going to like it.
I suppose that's a risk of this kind of work, that you may change. I hope you would, but you decide the changes you want to make. And maybe everybody in your life won't be comfortable with that. If that's a concern of yours, we could do some work with that too. Okay. One thing I wanted to do today, among several, is give you an opportunity to kind of find out how we're going to work together. And I'd like to find out a bit more about maybe your own expectations, what you're hoping for.
Eliciting Ruth's expectations, hopes, fears, and ambivalent feelings is essential in this first session.
Well, I thought maybe that you would just ask me questions, and that I would answer them. And then you would just tell me how to change whatever it was that I was worried about. That was the main thing that I wanted you to do.
Let's say I had a magic wand and I could wave it, and all of a sudden your sleep disorder would be cured. You wouldn't have a racing heart. You wouldn't have all the symptoms you just talked about. How do you think your life would be any different?
Well, I'm not sure. I guess I would just feel a little bit more comfortable. And I won't worry so much about what's wrong with me all the time.
What are the things that are going on in you that you'd like to understand more?
Well, I kind of about the last couple of years I've been, you know, I'm getting close to my 40th birthday, and I've been feeling
Allowing Ruth an opportunity to tell her story is important. Later in the session, Dr. Corey will explain to her how therapy works.
One thing I'm hoping we can do today is talk a little bit about how we'll be working together and what we'll be doing in here. Because I think the more you can learn about this process, the more you can take initiative and use it. And what I hope you do is talk about something that's difficult, not easy stuff. Because I assume that my job is to help you with things that are harder to talk about.
So I should decide what to talk about before I come?
Well, at least give it some thought. And I see my job as more to kind of support you, to challenge you, to certainly be present during the session and listen and let you know what it's like to hear what you're saying. But my job isn't to somehow make decisions for you. This is a learning situation. And if you want to really make the best use of it, I think you're going to have to do something at home. And one thing I'd like you to do is keep a journal and write down your thoughts and your feelings. And we'll talk more about that, and that's in the handout I'm going to give you.
In closing, Dr. Corey and Ruth briefly process their first session together.
I'd like to know how it's been to have the first hour together here. How has it been for you?
Well, it was very different than what I expected.
Tell me a little more about that.
Well, I thought that you would just ask me a lot of questions, and I would just tell you the answers. And so it went differently. It was a little bit more comfortable than I thought it would be.
I'm very open at any point for you to ask questions about what we do. I don't want to have any mystery in this. I think the more you know about the process and about what we're doing, the more you'll be able to use this. If I had to draw from any one particular approach in the beginning, it would be the person-centered approach, which stresses understanding her world as she's experiencing it. So as much as possible, I didn't want to have any preconceived notions or ideas about how we would end up. But I did want to give her a chance to talk about her fears, her expectations, and what it was like in this moment of being together. So the material I got was largely from her and what she was thinking and feeling and doing in that moment. If I had one main thing I wanted to accomplish, it was setting the stage for what we would be doing later. I'd want her at least to begin to think about what her work would be in this and what my work would be. And so giving her that package of materials to read and take home, and the assignment or two will prep her, I think, for next session. In this next session, Ruth and I demonstrate the importance of trust as the foundation for the therapeutic relationship. One thing I'd like to find out, too, is did you have any afterthoughts, Ruth, about the session last week?
It seemed so different for me. I wondered whether it was being selfish.
Do you have an answer for that? Was it being selfish?
It seems that would be the response of some of the people in my life, my husband maybe. I'm not used to having somebody really ask me so many questions about myself and be so interested. It feels kind of awkward, like I'm the subject of all of this, and I'm not used to having somebody pay so close attention to what I'm thinking and what I want.
In this second session, Dr. Corey and Ruth continue to explore and clarify their roles in establishing a working relationship.
I was hoping that you'd be telling me more what to do, and you'd be making more of the decisions.
Right. You know, I think even if I had enough wisdom, which I don't, to tell you what to do, I'll tell you why I wouldn't want to do that. Because you'd have to keep coming forever then. Because anytime you get a new problem, you'd have to come back and say, well, where am I going to go next? So, although I can appreciate you maybe wanting that, it'd be easier in a way. I really don't want to give in too easily to tell you what you should do. It sounds like that's what you've heard a lot in your life already.
I just, besides my husband, I really don't talk that much to other men. And so it's new to talk to somebody that's a man and somebody that's a stranger. I really don't know you. And
so I'm a strange man. Huh?
So, in a way.
The therapeutic relationship is one of the most significant factors in the change process. Developing trust as the foundation will take some time.
It sounds like you're cautious with me. In some way you're measuring what you're going to say. You're very aware of what I might be thinking and how I might be receiving you.
Well, I suppose it's, my way of trying to determine whether I should trust you with information or parts of...
I don't expect you immediately to trust. I think this is new and it's going to take time, but I think what I hope you could do is at least talk about what you do feel or what gets in your way of building a trusting relationship.
In building this relationship, who the counselor is as a person is just as important as his or her knowledge and counseling skills. As this trust deepens, so does the process of therapy.
I've had a lot of conflict with my father in particular around my religious beliefs.
Okay.
And that's been very difficult for me.
So that's certainly something we could talk about.
Yeah, it's something that I know I've struggled with inside myself, but I've never spoken about it to anyone before. I'm nervous about what might come out next, what I might say. Maybe that I'd revealed too much.
Let's go with that for just a moment. What if you do reveal too much?
Well, I'm afraid I'd be feeling exposed.
All therapeutic approaches, regardless of what they are, psychoanalytic, existential, person-centered, reality therapy, behavior therapy, they all have one thing in common. I think they agree that unless there is a working relationship, that therapy will go no place. So let me just comment about what I see happening in this session here between the two of us. What I particularly liked is that Ruth was willing to talk about how she felt with me in this session, that she was aware of feeling vulnerable, as she put it. maybe exposed, that she had revealed too much. And I see that as the foundation to our working relationship. If she can begin to say, I'm afraid I'll reveal too much, and then you'll be thinking thus and so, then we're going to build a trusting relationship. If she does all this silently, I'm not privy to what's going on with her, and I have no way to work with this. In this next session, I demonstrate the importance of focusing on very specific therapeutic goals which will guide the therapeutic journey.
I gave you the autobiography that you asked me to write, and I was just wondering, was it okay?
Oh, I read it. How was it for you, though? I'm not trying to be evasive, but I would really like to know what you thought of it.
Well, it was kind of interesting to write. I hadn't thought much about writing the story of kind of what's gone on in my life, so it did bring up a lot of different feelings for me as I was writing.
Like you said, a lot of different feelings. Can you mention 2 or 3 different feelings it brought up?
Some disappointment, some anger.
In therapy, autobiographical and journal writing can help uncover areas of difficulty in a client's life and lead to a more specific set of goals.
I'd like to spend some time in this session talking about specific goals that we're going to be working on as long as we're together. Now, we'll change that. It's not that we have to talk about that today and forever we'll hold you to it. But I think it is important that you think about what do you want and why are you coming here and how can we best get it. So what were some of the things you came up with?
Well, I made a list. One of the things on the list that I haven't said much about yet is that I'd like to feel better about my appearance, about my looks. One of the other goals was about my relationship with Jennifer, my daughter. Very strained right now since she's become a teenager. And I used to feel really close to her, and now it doesn't feel that way anymore. I'm not sure how to change it, but I like to feel like we're not strangers.
Ruth, a lot of these things I want to come back to. What I'm trying to do now is just kind of lay out a tentative agenda. And I think it really helps you, as much as me, to be thinking about what do you want from these sessions. So there's the thing about school and about other people's approval and about weight and about a different relationship with Jennifer. Any other goals that came up for you?
As specific therapy goals are established, Dr. Corey and Ruth must now prioritize them.
Of that whole list that you just went through, and it may change between now and next week, but are there any things that are on the top of your head that you feel ready to go with? If we had another hour right now and you were to continue, what do you most think you'd want to pick up on?
Perhaps the relationship with my husband.
Clarifying goals will be an ongoing process throughout the course of therapy.
It's not that these goals end here. This is really the beginning. I think every week I'll be asking you to keep thinking and refining and fine-tuning. What is it that you want? And that could include what you want with others. So it's not just what you want selfishly, but what do you want in your life? And how do you want your life to be different? So I don't see that as ending now. But I think sometimes people keep themselves very vague. And so what I've been trying to do is get you to kind of think about how you can make these manageable. In the back of my mind, I think what I'm really attempting to get at is for Ruth to look at the direction that she's moving toward in her life, and then getting her to make an evaluation of that direction. Is it taking her to the place she wants to go? And if she says no, then we can say, okay, what direction would you like to go? And I'm really borrowing that largely from reality therapy, that asks clients to make the evaluation of what they want to change. And also from behavior therapy and cognitive behavior therapy, the importance of having very clear goals so that we know where we're going. But the most important thing is that these goals should not be ones that I dream up for Ruth, that I think are important, but ones that really come from her. focus of this next session is on cognition, how these beliefs of Ruth affect what she's doing and how she's feeling.
Learning what techniques to use, when to use them, and with which clients defines integrated psychotherapy. At this point, Dr. Corey chooses a cognitive approach.
And it sounds more like what you're telling yourself, and I'm checking this to see if this fits for you, is that everything I do has to be done outstandingly well. I have to be perfect in really everything. A perfect mother, a perfect student, a perfect wife, a perfect daughter. You didn't say it, but maybe a perfect client. You know, that everything you do, you kind of rate. And I don't know, does that fit?
That does fit.
It does. Well, what's it like? I'd like to get a little bit, stay with that a little bit. What's it like to live under that kind of perfectionism?
It's a lot of pressure, but it's always been that way for me since the time I was small. My mom always said, if you can't do a job well, don't do it at all.
Here, they focus on where Ruth picked up her beliefs and how her thinking influences her everyday life. To explore further, Dr. Corey involves her in a role play.
How about you trying to be a part of you that wants to ease up and be maybe kinder to yourself, not be so perfectionistic. But I want to be another side, maybe like a mother side, or the side that you're never quite doing enough. And don't worry if you do it right, okay?
Okay.
Maybe just kind of stay with that part for a while about being a little less critical of yourself and your performances. Like, I'd like to ease up on myself. Start with that.
Okay. I'd like to ease up on myself.
Oh, but Ruth, if you do, you never know where that's going to stop.
Not necessarily. It doesn't mean that I'm going to give up on my goal. It just means I don't have to be so hard on myself.
Yes, but being hard on yourself keeps you in there fighting and doing your best.
Well, yes, it does, but I don't have to be the best at every single thing.
Oh, yes, you do. The best of everything. Super. Super mother. Super student. Super wife. Super friend.
That's the messages I've always heard.
In exploring how her beliefs influence her life, Ruth discovers she has deeper feelings.
I wonder if that wears you down.
It does. Even just listening to you, I feel tired. I'm tired. I'm tired of always having to measure
It doesn't
up.
surprise me in the least, all these things that you say. That you have such high expectations. They're incredibly high. That if you get even perfect, you're thinking about the next performance, that it's not going to be quite perfect enough. No wonder you're worn down.
Well, I just don't want to do it anymore. I'm just exhausted.
Did you hear what you just said?
I said I don't want to do it anymore. I'm exhausted.
Uh-huh. What's it like to say that? I'm exhausted and I don't want to carry this burden anymore.
Feel some relief. But I don't know how to stop. Sometimes I feel like I just don't know how to stop. Keeping on and going and going and going and doing it. Like I'm in some kind of a whirlwind and I just don't know how to slow down.
Well, what I see a little different now is at least you're talking about that. And you're saying, I don't know how to stop and I want to and I'm exhausted. That's a little bit different, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you suppose it would be like if you were to say some of these things to some important people in your life? Like some of your kids and your husband, maybe. That I can't do it anymore. Or, I don't want to do all of these things and be everything to everybody.
Guess that's a place to start. It'll be difficult. I just keep it all in, maybe because I'm afraid that if I let some of it out, I'll start feeling about it.
You might. What are you feeling
I feel like I just did.
What's it like for you? You talked about weights on your shoulder and being burdened. What's it been like to talk about some of that?
well, it feels a little lighter. Like for the first time I realized what I was doing, and I told somebody about it, and I told somebody that I wanted to stop.
Mm-hmm. So that's new.
It's just hard to change.
Yeah, it is. Look at how many years you've been going on this path of trying to do it all perfectly well. What I think was interesting about this session is even though there was an interest in her beliefs and her thinking and her internal standards, that it affected her in other ways as a whole person. It affected her body. She started talking about her tight shoulders. It affected her emotionally. She became a bit sad and the beginnings of some anger. So I think what this demonstrates is we don't work cognitively and emotively and behaviorally separately, that one leads into another and they are integrated. In this next session, I'm working with Ruth in terms of helping her identify and express what she's feeling. She's had a lifetime of containment of these feelings. As you'll see, this affects what she does in everyday life.
I have asked John now, it's been several times, to take a walk with me, as we had planned.
Mm-hmm.
And each and every time I've asked him, he's refused. He's found some excuse. He's got something else to do, or there's a football game on TV. I don't know what I am to him. I mean, I just feel like I'm there to cook his dinner, to clean the house, to wash clothes, and I'm not sure that there's anything else going on between us.
Mm-hmm. How is it for you as you're telling me this right now? What are you experiencing?
Well, nothing's changed between him and I, but something's going on for me. I get real sad, I get really depressed, once in a while tearful, cry for a short period of time, and then I make myself stop. And I tell myself that I shouldn't be so weak. And I'm feeling a little frightened about what I'm feeling inside.
Helping clients learn to identify and express their feelings can be a key part of therapy. Dr. Corey has Ruth focus on the here and now experience of her feelings rather than just talking about them.
Could you try something? If I could be John and I won't even say anything, maybe you could borrow my eyes for a while and kind of talk to me about I'm not in your life. Maybe tell me directly, if I were John sitting here, what is that like for you?
I don't feel like I can say anything to you because you keep telling me that I've changed, and I want to change, and you don't want me to. So every time I say something to you, it's met with your disapproval. I don't know what I am to you anymore. You talk to me about cooking dinner. You talk to me about whether the clothes are clean, whether I've gone to the dry cleaner. And that's about it. So I'm nothing to you. I'm just nothing to you. You don't encourage me in what I want to do with my life. I'm not a person. I'm just, if I meet your needs, then I'm a good wife. And if I don't, then I'm nobody. I feel like I don't exist. Like I'm invisible. Like you really don't see me. And that makes me feel lonely and frightened.
What are you experiencing right now?
I don't know if I could ever say that to him. I'm afraid. I'm just afraid. I'm not sure what of, but I'm afraid that...
Because your voice is different, and your chin was quivering, and your eyes are moist.
As soon as I say I'm afraid he's going to leave, I think to myself that as long as I don't change, he never will. Because he's not unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I make his dinner, as long as I do what I'm supposed to do, he's not unhappy. I'm the one that's unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
So what if I keep this changing going on, and I go out for my own walks, and I continue going to school, and I change, then how am I going to be with him? How am I going to stay with him and still be okay? I think that scares me even more.
I think if there's one particular theory I was most drawn to here is more the existential approach, which focuses on don't just report what's going on, but live it in the session. My main aim was to attempt to enter her world more, to get a sense more of what it must be like for her, to give up some of her protection and her self-containment and being all together. And now in her eyes being weaker, more vulnerable, more frightened of what might be the outcomes will be, and will I leave my husband, will he leave me? I saw all that as progress in a way, because now she's able to put words with me to some things that before she wouldn't even allow herself to think about. Although it's important to focus on what clients think and how they feel, a crucial piece is what they do. This session focuses on Ruth's behavior in everyday life and what ways she might want to change. So last week, Ruth, I remember the session being pretty emotional for you.
It was kind of hard for me to come back tonight. I was worried about what it would be like to be with you again after you kind of seeing that vulnerable part of me.
And how is it for you to tell me that now?
There was some relief in it, besides the embarrassment. And I remember when I was journaling that I wrote down about, my embarrassment of you seeing me that way, but also that I had felt relieved and I felt better.
Because their prior session together was an emotional one, Dr. Corey and Ruth reflect on how this affected them. Such transitions can be an important part of therapy.
Now, one thing that I wrote in my journal after that session was that even though it's really sad that there's a lot of problems in my relationship with John, I realized that I'm going to go forward, that I really do want to change. And even if he doesn't want me to, it's something that I need to do for me.
Mm-hmm. So you're ready to kind of do things for yourself, irrespective if other people are going to go along with some of the things you may want to do.
Well, there's a couple things in particular that I thought I would, that I've really been wanting to do, but I haven't kind of have the motivation. And remember, not long ago when we were setting goals, we talked about my weight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that I'd like to try and start to work on.
Ruth is now ready to work on making changes in her life. Dr. Corey's role is to help her identify and focus on the behaviors involved.
Do you have any kind of idea of what you want to do that?
Well, I think one of the problems is that I really don't get much exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I'm really, I get out of breath when I walk upstairs, and I'm really, I don't have much energy.
Mm-hmm. What for you would be something you'd want to do?
Well,
do you want to exercise, first of all?
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Because I want to feel better. I want to feel healthier.
Helping clients explore their options and make changes in their everyday lives is central to the behavioral focus.
If walking is pleasurable, then by all means do that. But there are a whole range of other things you could do too. Swimming, playing tennis, jogging.
Well, I think I'd start with the walking. I'd be more comfortable with the walking.
And how long would you walk?
About 20 minutes.
Together, they develop a detailed behavioral plan that Ruth can work with.
One of them is you're going to walk 4 times a week, at least 20 minutes each time, and you're going to write down what you eat and when, and keep a monitor. You're going to monitor that, and I think it might help if you could somehow be accountable to somebody. Do you have any friend, anybody in class that you'd be willing to contact and tell them how you're doing on these? What I was drawing on here is largely a behavioral focus of it's important to do something if you want to change. And what we were trying to work on more was to predict barriers that would get in her way so that she could, when those obstacles came, that she could do something about getting through them. And I think what was important is to get her focused on something that she wanted. Like walking was much less important what, but something she wanted to do and carry forth with it. And secondarily, I think it was important that she find some kind of outside support system. So Susan, her friend, would be very helpful here in terms of helping her when she gets down or doesn't follow through with her plan. In this session, there's an integrative focus, which means I'm very interested in working with Ruth's thoughts, her feelings, and her behavior.
It's really starting to bother me. I'm having that feeling like my chest is pounding and feeling kind of dizzy again. And just since last week, it's been bothering me again.
And what's been happening since last week?
Well, I've been thinking about this marriage thing, that we've been talking about in here. And I really want to find a way to talk to John about, participating more. It's been hard for me to try to take what I learn in here and go home and talk to him without getting really emotional or without getting into an argument or without feeling really hurt.
Since clients are thinking, feeling, and behaving individuals, integrated therapy looks at the whole person. Here, Dr. Corey starts with Ruth's thinking or cognitive process.
What do you think you are telling yourself when he turns you down? When he doesn't do what you always want? What do you think goes on inside of your head?
He doesn't love me anymore.
So you make that conclusion. You jump to the conclusion that if I don't always get what I want with John, then he doesn't love me. I'm not a good enough person? Could that be a part of it?
I'm not important. I'm not good enough. I'm not something missing in me. Otherwise, he wouldn't want to do this. I don't know if it makes sense.
So maybe what you could do is be aware that maybe your conclusion is faulty in some way. That if he turns you down or you don't get what you want, it may not be indicative that you're not worthy, that you're not lovable, and that there's something wrong with you. Maybe it's that he's scared.
In addition to looking at Ruth's way of thinking, exploring her feelings and emotions is also necessary.
You said you're very emotional when you talk to him, and you're afraid you're going to cry, and you feel hurt a lot. Is there more you want to do with that?
Dr. Corey and Ruth get involved in another behavioral role play, where Ruth's thinking and feelings come to the surface.
You've cried. He's trying to reassure you. Be him. What would he say? And I'll be Ruth for a bit.
There you go. Now, you're crying. Now, what did I do wrong?
You know,
must
John,
have said something.
It's not that you did something wrong. It's just that sometimes I feel like there's not much hope. And I really want to go to this retreat with you.
But every time you cry, I just feel like I can't do anything right with you.
I know, but
you're so sensitive.
I want you to know it's not just you. There's a lot of things in my life with Jennifer and other people, my father.
Later in the session, Dr. Corey moves to a more behavioral emphasis with Ruth.
So maybe you could let them know when those feelings come up a bit more about what is going on with you and about the hurt. And if you feel you can't do that, maybe you could even talk to a tape recorder in private about what's going on with you. Maybe write in your journal about that. But before we leave, I'd like to talk about how you're going to go home and deal with John, because you did say you really want to approach him. So what kind of homework can you give yourself in this area?
Well, I think I'll commit to talking to him before next session.
Okay.
About the marriage retreat.
What day do you think you'll pick?
What day? How about Tuesday?
Okay. Is that okay for you?
Yeah, I think that's a good day.
Okay. Clients are really an integrated whole, that we can't neatly separate thinking from feeling from doing. And in one session, we really touched upon all the three different dimensions. First of all, Ruth had some thoughts that I think get in her way at times, and part of my technique was to get Ruth to identify what are those thoughts. The role-playing was designed to highlight some of that. There was also, on her part, getting in touch with some feelings of hurt and anxiety, and again, that flowed from talking about her thoughts. Then at the end of the session, I wanted her to think of a concrete plan of action, something she would do once she left here, setting her up for homework. And it was really important that she gets John to go on the retreat. So we rehearsed it in several different ways. And I felt she was very strong and staying with herself. So my main technique was to get her, when she feels like shutting down, to talk out loud. Some people tend to discount the importance of working with the past in therapy. As you'll see, the past can be a very important component of helping us understand what's going on here and now.
I wanted to tell you that I had talked to John about the idea of going on the marriage retreat.
Yeah, how did that
go?
And
I was surprised he agreed to go. At first he didn't, he wasn't real, excited about the idea. But he did listen to me. He heard me, and he heard how important it was. And he was a little concerned about going himself. He didn't know what was going to be expected of him. But he did agree to go. So I just shared with him how important it was to me.
Ruth has been successful in communicating her needs to her husband. However, their plans for attending a religious retreat together brings up a new issue.
This last week, I've been thinking a lot about my past and kind of anticipating going to this church weekend. I was thinking a lot about how I grew up in the church. My father being a minister and everything, and how much that's influenced me.
Since we all have a history and are influenced by our past, exploring developmental experiences as a basis for understanding current issues can be useful.
There's one particular incident that I remember that keeps kind of coming back to me, and I keep going over and over it again. And it's kind of hard for me to talk to you about it.
So you're willing to take that chance?
I feel like I need to talk about it.
Yeah.
There was a neighborhood kid that I played with a lot, and he was a boy that lived a couple doors down from us. Well, we were playing, and he was the doctor, and at one point he took some of my clothes off, and all of a sudden my father found us, and he walked in, and he yelled at me, and he said, "Ruth, what are you doing?" And I was so ashamed. I knew that he was really disappointed in me. And I knew that he'd never feel the same.
Pretend I'm your father, and I'm not going to say anything. And maybe if you could look at me and tell me, I just caught you, okay? And I want you to tell me what's going on inside of you.
To help Ruth explore her past, Dr. Corey uses role-playing and Gestalt techniques to bring the past into the present.
Oh, Dad, I'm sorry. I don't know why I let that happen. And I know you've always taught us never to do anything like that. Now I just don't know how I'll ever look at you again. I'm so embarrassed and ashamed. I don't know how you're feeling towards me, and I'm afraid you won't love me anymore.
Ruth is still deeply affected by some of her past, in particular her rigid upbringing as a child.
Like I had done something so bad that he was never gonna love me again. He was never gonna talk to me. He was always gonna think of me as somebody that was bad and dirty and somebody that disappointed him and did exactly what I was taught not to do by the church.
Here, Ruth shows some emotion. Later, Dr. Corey suggests a role play.
Are you willing to try something with me? Maybe you can be the voice of your church and your past and your father and give voice to that and talk to me, and I'll be another part, a more accepting part, the part that you say you'd like to hear.
Dr. Corey suggests that they switch roles.
So now you're just going to be doing whatever you feel like doing?
No, I didn't say that.
You don't have any values
Oh,
anymore?
I do have values, but they're my own values, and they're not the values that you've been preaching.
Oh, I can tell that because you're not going to the church that you were raised in. You're
I
going
know,
to that
because
new liberal church.
I have a lot of trouble with that church I was raised in.
So now is this new church teaching you can do whatever you feel like?
No, the new church is teaching me, the new values are teaching me I'm a human being, I've got my faults, but I'm not bad. And even though I may do bad things at times, I'm not basically evil.
And you don't know how hard it is for me to have a daughter that doesn't come to my service anymore.
But you know, and for many years I tried to get your approval. And I think the only way I could get your approval would be if I would be the exact daughter you'd want. Scared, frightened, all those things. And I don't want to be that. So to get your approval costs too much. The price is way too high.
I sure wish I could talk to my father that way.
I want to comment that I think the past and the present are very much related, and I don't know how to separate them. But the main piece, my bias is that as much as possible, I would like the client to experience in the here and now what he or she is struggling with, rather than just telling me about it, which is very Gestalt-oriented. So I simply ask her to stop and to relive and re-experience what it must have been like to be 6 years old. And I think the value of this is she begins to feel this as well as just talk about it in an intellectual and a kind of removed way. Much of therapy is designed to help clients examine their old decisions to determine if they're still functional. In this session, Ruth identifies a few decisions that she wants to revise.
I kind of carried with me the voices from his disapproval from when I was a child.
And when you think about the decisions that you made as a child, are you clear on maybe some of the decisions you did make? What you told yourself about your own worth?
I think I told myself that I was only good if I behaved the way that he wanted me to. That sexuality was bad and wrong.
Through therapy, Ruth has gained greater insight into her thoughts and decisions. Now she can begin to apply what she has learned.
What are some of the ways you're revising them? What are some new decisions you're at least approaching?
Well, once I told John about what had happened, he seemed to be more understanding about how that had affected the beginning of our marriage, and maybe even still how now sometimes it keeps me from feeling more free. And now I've been able to, having his understanding, be able to tell him a little bit about, how I'm feeling or, what I might be wanting. I feel like I can get close to him without feeling awkward and funny about it.
I remember when you first came in, I still have visions of that in terms of how much you doubted yourself and how you were so censored about everything you wanted to say.
Insight without action is only half the job of therapy. Making new decisions on emotional and cognitive levels, not just intellectually, is essential.
That seems to be going along well. Oh, by the way, I got into that fitness class.
Yeah.
Remember I told you I was going to
do.
enroll? It was really hard because it was full. And I went to see the instructor, and I told her, I know the enrollment is full. It's really important to me, and I've been wanting to take this class. And she said she'd save a space for me and let me add the class.
Was that a little difficult for you to do?
It was difficult. I was real nervous. And the instructor could see that I was nervous.
Now, do you suppose there's a new decision operating here that leads you to do this, to go and talk to your instructor this way?
Well, maybe something like that I could express something that I want or that I need.
That I have a right to have some needs and to express them, even though you got a full class. And I may not get in, but I sure would like to.
I feel, too, like I'm telling myself that I don't have to give up all the time. I could kind of try and fight for something and hang in there a little bit longer to see if it's possible. I'm not giving up so soon.
By putting into practice what she has learned in therapy, Ruth has found promising results and new confidence. Together, they discuss the idea of termination and Ruth's continued growth.
This has helped a lot. Overall, I feel more confident in myself. In fact, I'm getting to the point where I'm wondering if I should try this on my own. I kind of have thought about it for a while. And there's one part of me that says, oh, well, I wouldn't be able to do it without Jerry's support and encouragement. And then there's this other part that says, well, maybe I could. Maybe I could kind of hear his voice telling me that, maybe I'm not so bad after all. And I'm thinking about it.
I very much like the work you've been doing, and I don't see it as a cop-out. I don't think you're trying to get out of something. And what I would very much hope is that we meet next week and make next week our final session so we can review things. But what I would like to suggest is, could you set up a plan, now that you're going to finish here, of how you can use this as a beginning and go on to new things, like we've talked a bit about.
You talked about that group.
Yeah.
I'm still pretty
How did you
nervous
know I was
about
going to bring that up?
I knew you were going to bring that up.
Okay. To a large extent, I'm really drawing on cognitive, behavioral, and the experiential approaches, because I'm asking you to feel what those early decisions felt like, and to feel how she would like to behave differently, and feel differently, and also to begin to think about those decisions. So it's really a mixture of cognitive, behavioral, and experiential. And my main hope is not that she throws everything away that she learned, but that she revises her decisions and see what parts of her early learning that she wants to keep and what parts she may want to modify. It's interesting, too, that Ruth brings up the issue of termination, and I want to stress that I think therapy should be movement from the very first session towards termination. And yet, as you know, I'm trying to prepare her for how can we begin after termination, that you can continue your own program. So largely, I'm very much in here into action orientation. What have you learned in this being together that you can begin to apply in your life once we formally terminate? Termination is sometimes a very difficult process, both for the therapist and the client. As we'll see, this is a process, not done in one session. Ruth examines what she's learned in therapy over 6 months and what she intends to do with it now that she's terminating. I remember last week, one of the things we talked about was this would be your last formal session here. I'd like to find out how it was as you were coming here today, what you were thinking and feeling.
Well,
having said that.
There's kind of two parts to it. One was I was kind of excited, you know, kind of like graduating and kind of moving on to something on my own, and I was excited about that. But I realized as I was driving here that I feel sad. I'm gonna miss this. I'm gonna miss you, and it's gonna be hard, that part.
Ambivalent feelings about termination are common for clients. Ultimately, the decision is the client's choice.
You know, part of what I'm going to miss is, you know, having somebody really listen. And I feel like you heard me, and I feel like you were okay with me. That you just let me be and find my way. And through that, I found that I could trust you. And I think this is the first time where I felt so comfortable talking about myself and trusting that what I told you, you weren't going to be judgmental or critical about.
For therapists, an important index of progress is the therapeutic relationship. If it has been one of trust and the client is dealing with difficult personal issues, then therapy is working.
I hope you'll see your part in that. That I'm not going to say I didn't have a part in it, but I think you were the one that talked initially about what might get in your way of trusting me. You see that part?
Yeah, I do.
Because every time you said, I have got something I want to bring up, but I'm scared and I'm not sure how you're going to respond, that was opening the door to doing some hard work.
Dr. Corey and Ruth evaluate her progress, an assessment process which has continued from the first session to the last.
Well, I think what was helpful was sometimes we spent a lot of time talking about my thoughts and where kind of they came from and how I might want to change them. And sometimes I think it was important for me to, you know, not think so much about thinking and to just feel. Like I know that it was helpful when you asked me what was going on for me at the moment, or what was it like for me to be with you, or to have done a certain thing when we were talking back and forth to each other as people in my family.
Through her experience with integrated therapy, Ruth has a new appreciation for herself as a thinking, feeling, and behaving individual.
But then also, it was hard for me to do what we practice in here on the outside. And I think if I hadn't had a place to practice and learn how to take what I'm learning here to the outside, I wouldn't be so encouraged to take this and use it with John and with Jennifer.
I think another thing you're saying in not so many words is that you learned a lot in here about yourself, but one of the key things was to take whatever insights you had and whatever awarenesses and begin to use them and practice them and do them.
While addressing the therapeutic relationship and the client's own perception of progress, the evaluation also looks at behavior change.
It's just kind of, you know, new world out there for me. And I'm excited about, you know, some of the things that are going to be happening soon, you know, in terms of my graduating and becoming a teacher. I'm excited about how I think John and I are getting along. I think we're talking more and understanding each other more. So I was kind of excited to try things even more of what I've learned in here out there.
Termination is a process that we build up to. This is a number of sessions we started talking about this, and as you know, the last session I asked Ruth to think about and write, where did she want to go to beyond here? My main attempt, I think, was to bring closure without closing things down. So I wanted Ruth to look at what this has meant to her, what she's learned, how she's learned it, and what she will continue to do with what she's learned. How she can go into other forms of therapy, couples, family, group, those are options. But her own projects, things she can do on her own. And I did ask her to talk about what was most important to her, what was most helpful. And I think her discussion brought out that working with techniques from a cognitive perspective, a feeling perspective, and a behavioral perspective are all important. That at different phases in her therapy, she needed different emphases. Sometimes she needed to be more heady and to think about things and challenge her beliefs. Other times she just needed to feel her sadness and experience her aloneness and experience the beginnings of anger. And sometimes she needed to take what she was learning in here and begin to translate it into different kinds of action and different behaviors out in the real world. So I think you could see, looking at this last session, that Ruth valued, and by the way, I want to stress this, that Ruth is the expert. The client is the expert. What's important is to her to find her own words and to see that she can make sense of this process. And this is the beginning of a new journey, not the end.
For Ruth, this journey will have many challenges, but through integrative therapy, she has learned to explore her thoughts, feelings, and behavior, a process that has given her new tools and insights to help her along the way. Through her own growth, she can continue to enrich her life and the lives of those around her.